I'm going to take about 30 minutes to talk about Bradley Manning, the United States Army Private First Class E2. The case of Bradley Manning goes far beyond anything we've done before. Most of these resistors are facing 3 years, realistically, in prison for refusing to fight, speaking out. Some have done nearly 2 years. Many end up doing 4, 6, 9 months. But Bradley Manning literally is facing the death penalty at this moment. Now, the prosecution has said that they're inclined only to seek life in prison. They will only seek life in prison. Once Bradley would die in prison, he'll be, at the time of his death, he'll be kicked out of the Army dishonorably. And I want to take a second, actually I want to take about 4.5 minutes to show you sort of the key parts of what's called the collateral murder video. And this video is of a helicopter, a U.S. Apache helicopter over Baghdad that mistakenly takes 2 Reuters reporters, some people from the neighborhood, and a couple of their security guards as a group of insurgents. And they engage these individuals. The people on the street are never even aware that there's a helicopter. This is an Apache. They're very quiet. And this one is about a mile away when they engage the Iraqis on the street. And again, this is literally Bradley Manning is facing 20 years in prison for allowing you to see this scene. So,
Roger that. We have no personnel east of our position, so you are free to engage over. Alright,
we'll be engaging. Roger, go ahead. I can't get them down because they're behind that building.
Anybody spend an element?
Got an RPG.
Alright, we got a guy with an RPG.
Having a fire?
Okay. No, hold on, let's come around. Go later. Let's come our point of view. Yeah, we're going to come around.
Fire. We won't.
Yeah, we got a guy shooting. Now he's behind the building.
God damn it.
Coming around.
Negative. He was right in front of the Brad. About there 1 o'clock. Haven't seen anything since then.
Just bucking. Once you get on, just open up.
Yeah, Roger. I see your element. You got about 4 Humvees out along this.
You're clear. Alright, firing.
Line here. What's the state line? Let me know when you gather.
Or shoot. Light them all up.
Traffic 260.
Come on, fire.
Hey, Roger.
Keep shooting. Keep shooting.
Bushmaster 2-6. Bushmaster 2-6. We need to move time now.
Alright, we just engaged all 8 individuals.
Yeah, we got 2 birds. We're still firing.
Roger. Got him.
6 is a 2-6. We'll move, but we got those.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
Bypass.
God damn it, Kyle. Alright. I hit him. Alright, you're clear. Alright, I'm just trying to find targets again.
Bushmaster 6 is a Bushmaster 2-6.
Got a bunch of bodies laying there. Alright, we got about 8 individuals.
Yeah, we got 1 guy crawling around down there, but we could definitely got him. Or shooting some more.
Roger. Hey, you shoot, I'll talk. Hotel 26, Crazy Horse 18.
Crazy Horse 18, this is Hotel 26, over.
Roger, currently engaging approximately 8 individuals, KIA, RPGs, and AK-47s.
Hotel 26, you need to move to that location once Crazy Horse is done and get pictures over. China.
Target 20 is the location.
The Hotel 26, Crazy Horse 18.
Oh yeah, look at those dead bastards. Nice. 26, Crazy Horse 18.
Thank you, Spears 02 flight, 3 this time. Spears 02, 3
Nice. Good shoot. Thank you.
Roger, we're going to move down there.
Roger, we'll cease fire.
Yeah, we won't shoot anymore.
He's getting up. If he has a weapon though in his hand? No, I haven't seen one yet.
You guys got that guy crawling right now on the
36 element. This is Hotel 27, over. Hotel 27, go ahead. Roger, I'm just trying to make sure that you guys have my turb, over.
Roger, we got you. Okay. Come on, buddy. All I gotta do is pick up a weapon.
Crazy Horse is Bushmaster 5, or Bushmaster 4, break. They're right below you, right time now. Can you walk us onto that location, over?
This is 2-6, Roger. I'll pop flares. We also have one individual moving. We're looking for weapons. If we see a weapon, we're going to engage. Now, Bushmaster, we have a van that's approaching and picking up the bodies. Where's that van at? Right down there by the body. Okay, yeah. Bushmaster, Crazy Horse, we have individuals going to the scene. Looks like possibly picking up bodies and weapons. Let me engage you.
Hey, we need to stop that so we can get down there. We need to point out. You see my look?
Roger. Break. Crazy Horse 1-8. Request permission to engage. Picking up the wounded. Yeah, we're trying to get permission to engage you. Come on, let us shoot. Bushmaster, Crazy Horse 1-8. We're taking him. Bushmaster, Crazy Horse 1-8.
It's Bushmaster 7, go ahead.
Roger, we have a black SUV or bongo truck picking up the bodies. Request permission to engage.
Bushmaster 7, Roger. This is Bushmaster 7, Roger, engage.
1-8, engage. Clear. Come on. Clear. Clear. We're engaged. Coming around, clear. Roger. Trying to, clear. Roger, I lost him in the... I got him.
So the video continues on for a few minutes. As many of you probably guessed, the van is actually sort of the ambulance for the local hospital. They didn't have an official van. A couple things here is the two people killed were Reuters reporters. Reuters had filed a Freedom of Information Act for the video because they thought maybe something like this existed. The military said it didn't exist. We say Bradley is facing life in prison for exposing war crimes. And this is one clear example of that war crime. I believe that the soldiers were under the impression that there was an RPG and armed people, and maybe they were insurgents. There were no U.S. troops in the area. They weren't actually fighting anybody. But assuming that we believe them under the rules of combat for that day, they engaged these people. But once they were shot and disabled, once they were bleeding out on the street there, those soldiers had an obligation under the Geneva Convention to care for their prisoners of war. There was no reason why U.S. troops couldn't make it to the scene, and actually just 30 seconds into this video, U.S. troops do make it onto the scene. One of those troops, his name is Ethan McCord. He's a big supporter of Bradley Manning's. And Ethan pulls out the two very badly wounded children that were sitting in the front seat of that ambulance because they were with their father when they heard that there was these injuries and went to go pick them up. Ethan took the young girl to the U.S. Army medic, and the medic said, "I'm not going to treat her. Take her to the local hospital. We can't afford to spend our time trying to save this girl's life." The girl did survive, though, I think in large part to Ethan's efforts. And as Ethan was trying to take care of this young girl from keeping her from dying, the commanding officer on the scene was yelling at him. And he, quote, said, Specialist McCord, get the sand out of your vagina, as he was trying to save the young girl's life. Bradley is charged with the collateral murder video, which we saw the key highlight of there. He's also charged with releasing the Iraq war logs, which are about 10 to 20,000 battlefield reports written on the battlefield. And what's significant about them is that each one of these reports is not really that important in and of itself, but together they actually paint a very vivid picture of how the U.S. conducted the war in Iraq. They detail very graphically how tens of thousands of Iraqi civilians were killed in the process of us liberating their nation, at a time when the U.S. claimed that they were not doing a body count. And yet, very clearly, here is this day-to-day body count building up. The Afghan war logs, again, these battlefield reports from what's going on in Afghanistan. One of the things that jumped out when we went through them was the details of how U.S. tax dollars were going to contractors operating in Afghanistan who were having child sex parties for the warlords that we were trying to win over to our side. Now, these warlords were very religious. They didn't have sex out of marriage. You have to be married first. But they had the loophole that if the male child hadn't reached puberty yet, it didn't count if they had sex with the young boy. And the Guantanamo files. The Guantanamo files are detainee assessments from Guantanamo that show that the U.S. knew that the majority of the prisoners held at Guantanamo were innocent of any crime, or there were low-level operatives that were scooped up along with hundreds of other people in Iraq and Afghanistan, and by chance or by a neighbor's word ended up in this hellhole of Guantanamo. Specifically, we now know that the U.S. held an Al Jazeera reporter in Guantanamo for 2 years, tortured him, held him in isolation. They knew he was innocent of any crime, but in the detainee assessment, they decided to continue holding him at Guantanamo because, quote, they would learn something about how Al Jazeera as a news agency operated. And U.S. State Department cables that are clearly embarrassing to the United States, but that's it. Documents should not be classified simply because they're embarrassing. There may be reasons to classify documents, but embarrassing is not one of those reasons, not even under law. I mentioned Bradley faces the death penalty, and that's because he is being charged with Article 104, aiding the enemy. In this case, indirectly, meaning via the internet. Now, a literal interpretation of this would mean that anybody in the military who posted anything on Facebook, on YouTube, that makes the military look bad is also in violation of 104, aiding the enemy. I was at the pretrial hearing. The prosecutor made a big deal that our enemies had released a little YouTube video referencing the collateral murder video as proof that they were aided. They said something like, we will fight the infidels, they are evil, look at this video, see what they're doing to us, our people, that's why we must fight them and drive them from the land. And that is why Bradley is literally facing the death penalty at this time. Now, for example, if you're a Marine and you take a video of your fellow Marines, say, urinating on dead corpses, that also technically would be a violation of Article 134. Again, our enemies are aided by something looking bad. Whether Bradley faces this charge or not, whether he faces the death penalty or just life in prison, is currently at the desk of the convening authority of the military court-martial. His name is General Linnington. And for the last 2 weeks, we've been calling his office. Dozens and perhaps hundreds of people have been calling his office saying, "Dear Mr. General, do not try to kill Bradley." And his staff, dutifully registers, our calls, and you still have time to call the general. It's on bradleymanning.org right there at the top. Bradley was a military intelligence analyst. He was arrested in May of 2010, about 20 months ago now. He was quickly transferred to Virginia, in the United States, to Quantico Marine brig or prison detainment facility. At first, we were as the support network came together, we were happy that Bradley was not going to be railroaded through a kangaroo court in Iraq or Kuwait, and that we would have the opportunity to make sure that he had legal counsel, not just the defense counsel provided to him by the military. But our encouragement started turning sour when we realized what kind of treatment he was undergoing at Quantico. Very quickly, that kind of treatment was isolation from any other prisoners, inability to have any meaningful exercise at all. And then we found out that every 5 minutes of the day, while he was awake, a guard would come to his cell and bark, "Are you okay?" And Bradley had to answer in the affirmative, yes. So that was his primary human contact, was somebody barking at him every 5 minutes, 14 hours a day, "Are you okay?" and him having to respond in the affirmative. At nighttime, he could sleep, but if his face rolled over away from the guard who could see them, the guard would open the door and jab him in the side of his ribs and say, "Are you okay?" to make sure that he was okay. And again, the pretense was they were doing this for his own good. They were making sure that he was okay. In order to make sure he was okay even more, they forced him to strip nude and stand in the middle of the hallway as the guards watched, female and male. And it was necessary for him to be completely naked so he couldn't hurt himself with his underwear or clothing, this kind of thing. We now know that the mental health professionals at Quantico were protesting that. They were telling the commanding officer that there was no justification for this, and they were told to shut up if they wanted to continue to work at the facility. And this torture is important because it's a clear violation of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Pretrial confinement in the military exists for one reason, to make sure that the person appears at their court hearings, they show up at their court-martial. If they're dangerous, they don't hurt anybody, they don't make other crimes. And yet, they were clearly trying to break Bradley Manning. They were trying to get him to confess. They were trying to get him to cooperate with their ongoing investigation of WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, and those investigative efforts continue today in a grand jury impaneled in Virginia. In response, people around the world actually started to care about Bradley. 300 law professors, including President Barack Obama's political science professor while he was in college, wrote an open letter decrying the treatment of Bradley Manning. The spokesperson for the State Department, P.J. Crowley, declared that the treatment of Bradley Manning was stupid. The administration was so pissed off at even that internal dissent that P.J. Crowley, within 48 hours, was forced to resign his position from the State Department. Hundreds of us went with our friends from Veterans for Peace to the White House. We were arrested at the White House in March. We were then again arrested the following day at the gates of Quantico. We also engaged in more interesting political theater as well. I'm going to show you a couple minutes of that. This was a fundraiser in San Francisco for the president's re-election campaign back in April.
Mr. President, we actually wrote you a song. Can we sing it?
Well, let me...
Dear Mr. President, we honor you today, sir. Each of us has paid you $5,000. It takes a lot of Benjamins to run a campaign. We paid our dues. Where's our change? Look for you in 2012. Yes, that's true. Look at the Republicans. What else can we do? Even though we don't know, we take our liberties.
People can have philosophical views about sort of one but look, I can't conduct diplomacy on an oversight. That's not how the world works. And you're in the military, and I have to abide by certain classified information. If I release something that I'm not authorized to release, I'm breaking the law. We're a nation of laws. We don't individually make our own decisions about how the laws operate. No, he's not fine. He's not fine. I mean, he's being British and he's asking questions. No, he broke the law. You can make it harder to break the law. Well, what he did was he's done. No, it wasn't the same thing. It wasn't. Elford wasn't classified the same way. So, anyway, all right.
But in another location in this country, alone in a six-foot house of this gravity, 23 hours a day and night, the president commanded state is trying to bring it right. We paid our dues, where's our change? We paid our dues, where's our change? Thank you. Thank you. We worked hard on it.
Much better voices than I.
Great Bradley Manning wanted to be.
Okay, thank you very much, guys.
I hope I don't get listening to.
So anyways, I don't know if it was coincidence, but within 48 hours of us singing that song to the president, Bradley Manning was transferred to Quantico, to the Leavenworth facility. You know, it was the 600,000 people that signed a petition when we teamed up with avaz.org. And all of that, you know, no one thing I think did it, but all of it together, the administration realized that they were making life harder for themselves for continuing the torture. What's interesting about that video is that it shows President Barack Obama declaring that Bradley Manning dumped information, that he's guilty. Unfortunately, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, unfortunately for the president, the Uniform Code of Military Justice has a clear prohibition against unlawful, illegal command influence. Meaning no member of an individual's chain of command is to declare an opinion on the innocence or guilt of a subordinate as he's going through the legal process. And here you have President Obama at the very top of Bradley's chain of command declaring him guilty even before he stepped in a court of law. A lot of people who have been following this story are confused because the media is actually ignoring what this story is about. Bradley Manning has provided source material, allegedly, for hundreds of original news articles that have appeared in every major newspaper of the world, including the New York Times, the Washington Post, the UK Guardian, and so on and so forth. And yet the media, under pressure from the U.S. administration, has done everything it can to distance itself from Bradley Manning, the whistleblower, and are using sensationalistic titles, some of which I threw up here that I've seen in the press. Disgruntled gay lashes out, endangers war effort. Twinkie defense expected. That's what they got from the pretrial hearing at Fort Meade in December. Angry trans soldier dumps on America, or dumps America's secrets. And yet, it has nothing to do with the case. Bradley Manning is a young gay man who served under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. He was treated fine by some soldiers. He was treated like crap by a lot of the soldiers. Prior to his arrest, he did actually come forward to his supervisors and say that I actually believe I'm reconsidering my gender. I'm not sure if I'm a guy. I might want to see myself as a woman at some point. And the military supervisor, and again, this was under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, came to the conclusion that they needed to give this guy some mental health counseling if he was going to stay in the military. They didn't. Under military regulations, for somebody who had security clearance, they were required to write up reports on this information, and they didn't. So in the midst of the pretrial hearing, as a mitigating factor, if Bradley is convicted, the issue of the military simply did not follow its procedures in this case will be an issue of what kind of punishment Bradley receives. But that's different than is at the core of his motivation for releasing this information. And what do we know about the motivation behind the release of this information? And this motivation is not contested by anybody. This is the government's evidence against Bradley. And here's, part of that chat log that Bradley faced in the pretrial hearing. This is Bradley. God knows what happens now. Hopefully worldwide discussion, debates, and reforms. If not, we're doomed as a species. I will officially give up on the society we have if nothing happens. The reaction to the video gave me immense hope, meaning when the collateral murder video was released and it unleashed debate around the world. I want people to see the truth because without information, you cannot make informed decisions as a public. I was actively involved in something that I was completely against. And yet the media thinks the Twinkie defense, that angry gay man. The military then turns around and this is the message that they say that Bradley shared with WikiLeaks when he provided them with a collateral murder video. This is perhaps one of the most significant documents of our time, removing the fog of war and revealing the true nature of 21st century asymmetric warfare. Have a nice day. I misspoke. This was the message that allegedly accompanied the Iraq war logs, the battlefield documents that show U.S. troops in Iraq. One of the main things about this documents is what we heard is that U.S. spies, our spies in Iraq are in danger now because of their names have been released. But by regulation, those names should not have been in these documents in the first place. It wasn't part of the they were forbidden to have names in these documents, and yet some of them were. But WikiLeaks did everything they could to even remove those documents from thousands of documents. At the end, no person has been shown to have been harmed by the release of those names. On the other hand, U.S. Marines who deliberately slaughtered 24 Iraqi civilians in their homes, in their beds, systematically in Haditha, were last week given no jail time at all. And yet Bradley Manning, a whistleblower in every sense of the word, who provided this information through no benefit to himself, is facing the death penalty, or at least life in prison. The documents were overclassified in the first place. Bradley's attorney, David Coombs, continues to try to drive that home in court. He's trying to get those people to take the stand who classified these documents. What was the basis for doing so? He's trying to get Secretary of State Hillary Clinton to take the stand, to actually have her under oath say that there was actually no real harm done from the release of these documents. And while there was no actual harm to anybody, there's been great benefit of these documents. And again, we can't know what the direct connection was, but the Tunisia gate, the Tunisia documents came out in the time of the upsurge in Tunisia and helped fuel that revolution to some extent. And documents on our relationship from Egypt were released in the months and weeks prior to the Egyptian revolution. And people now know about what we were doing in Guantanamo and have the evidence. It's one thing to suspect our government is doing something bad, but it's another thing to actually have documentation that something bad was going on. And these embarrassing State Department cables sort of enlightened almost people in every single country on earth how the U.S. really thought about them and their government. There's one minor example is they outline how U.S. corporate interests in Haiti were working with the U.S. Embassy in Haiti to sabotage a minimum wage bill that was moving its way through the Haitian Parliament. After 19 months, Bradley Manning finally had a pretrial hearing at Fort Meade, just about 30 minutes northeast of Washington, D.C., last December. We were able to organize 300 people to rally for Bradley on military property right there at Fort Meade within 18 days of notice. And a lot of that was because we were able to charter buses to pick people up at Occupy encampments in D.C. And we had a bus come all the way from New York City, Occupy Wall Street. Some of the most exciting things really had nothing to do with the legal arguments. Dan Ellsberg was sitting next to me one day, and during a recess, we were only a few feet behind Bradley, and during a recess, Dan just put his hand on Bradley's shoulder and said, "Hey, I'm Dan Ellsberg. I respect what you did. I released the Pentagon Papers." And as he said that, these two big Army soldiers just dragged Dan out of the courtroom, and there's a sketch of him during that scene. That very same day, I was hanging out with Lieutenant Dan Choi, who was supporting Bradley because he understands how tough it was for Bradley to be a young gay man under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And he really has a lot of respect for Bradley. He was there, and he was sort of what the guards say. He was back talking the guards. The guards would order us to and fro within the compound with 3 layers of security around the courtroom. And so the guards sort of said, "Hey, come over here." And they took him into a trailer. And then all of a sudden you hear the trailer start shaking, and you hear Dan Choi screaming because his arms are being twisted. It sort of reminded me of this horror movie where you have this like dinosaur in a cage, and they throw the dinosaur some meat. On the legal aspect of things, the Article 32 pre-trial hearing was run by an investigating officer acting as a judge. He has actually no experience as a judge. But the Army, for Article 32 hearings, all they have to do is find an impartial officer anywhere in the Army to act as this investigating officer. The problem is that this impartial officer was a reservist, and his full-time job was as a prosecutor for the Justice Department. Now, I'm sitting behind Bradley along with other supporters, but on the other side of the room are agents of various military and civilian prosecutors. The national NSA folks were there, the FBI was there. All of these people are collaborating with military prosecutors to help them do their job to prosecute Bradley. But some of the key collaborators were people from the Justice Department. So you have the Justice Department working very closely with the military prosecutors, exchanging notes, talking amongst each other right there on the prosecution table. And while you have an employee of the Justice Department sitting in judgment claiming to be impartial. And after being challenged on this issue, he thought about it, and he declared that he would be impartial going forward, and he made that promise to us. But as he went forward, the military prosecutors had about 20 witnesses. Every one of the 20 witnesses were allowed to take the stand. The defense asked for 48 witnesses. The impartial military investigating officer declared that you can only have the witnesses that the prosecution also wants. So that was 10. So the defense was allowed no witnesses that the prosecution didn't also want to testify. After a day of arguing of how completely ridiculous this was, we were given 2 of the remaining about 38 witnesses. All of the key witnesses that dealt with the actual merits of the defense were not allowed, and that's why the defense really was able to make its case in a couple hours, while the prosecution had 5 days to unfold its evidence. What have we accomplished so far? I think we've done a whole heck of a lot. I think the government fully intended to paint Bradley as a traitor, as a Benedict Arnold, as somebody who basically sold America's secrets to the enemy, even if he received no money. But as a grassroots movement, we have been able to get out there and influence millions of people. Millions of people around the world really do support Bradley. With the help of thousands of primarily Americans, but people around the world, we've been able to completely fund his legal defense team. And this is a legal defense team of Bradley and his family's choosing. We made the promise that we would pay every dime of whatever team that he chose. That's how David Coombs got this case. I can say without a doubt that Bradley has complete confidence in David, and if Bradley is happy with his defense on the most basic level, then our support network is happy with the legal defense. Having paid $150,000, the bills are paid up. We probably have about another $50,000 to pay through court-martial. But we're pretty confident that our friends will step forward and help us out. But we're now turning our attention to public education, like, for example, this gathering, rallies. We're doing ads in newspapers. We have billboards. We have a billboard just outside as you enter Washington, D.C. So if you're traveling from Fort Meade to Washington, D.C., you have to drive by a 40-foot Bradley Manning billboard today. And in Kansas City, near Leavenworth, where Bradley is being held, we have 2 billboards in support of Bradley. The court-martial, basically, this Article 32 happened. The lieutenant colonel issued his opinion, basically that the prosecution should have everything it wants. His supervisor rubber-stamped that opinion. It is now on the desk of General Linnington. We expect that decision any day. I'm sort of surprised it hasn't happened this week already. But that decision will be the actual charges. Will Bradley face the death penalty or just life in prison? Will he face aiding the enemy or just the other 22 charges that add up to 120 years? And the date of the court-martial. And I'm expecting that to be around May of this year. We are going to get hundreds of people back to Fort Meade, hopefully thousands if we do our work right. And we're also hoping to have over 100 solidarity events around the world. And maybe Portland will be one of those events where we can have a little vigil or a rally of something to tie in the local news to this big issue that's going on in society. There's our billboard for Bradley outside of D.C. Part of we're going around, we are trying to raise funds. We basically need to raise about another $100,000 through the end of the court-martial to continue doing what we're doing, paying the legal team, paying our bills. That's our challenge. It seems like a lot of money on a grassroots level, but we have already raised $400,000 in the last year and a half. And again, it's because people really do care about this case. $400,000 is a lot of money. We have a monthly expense report that we provide on the bradleymanning.org website. The I Am Bradley photo campaign is a way that people can be part of this campaign, even if they're by themselves in any corner of the world. And we run these images as ads in independent newspapers. So I'm hoping that some of you will be emboldened to embrace this campaign, be part of it. We have a full-time staff of people that exist to do nothing more than support grassroots activists around the country. We have materials, a few I brought with me, but I can only take so much without incurring additional baggage fees. But if you need something, we're in the office every day, and we'll send it out to you that same day. You'll have it in a couple of days. If you're somebody who's like, I could use 1,000 Bradley Manning stickers to do something creative and legal with those stickers, we'll get you 1,000 Bradley Manning stickers. It's not a problem. We want to, whatever we can do to help you take Bradley out, 1,000 stickers, 10,000 info cards, whatever. We will do it for you because people have been generous enough to make those funds available and make those resources available. We have a petition for Bradley Manning, the Stand With Bradley petition. Some of those names will appear in like a New York Times ad during his court-martial. But a lot of times you sign a petition and you're like, oh, I'm just going to get a bunch of spam from somebody I don't care about. You might get spam, every couple weeks from us, and it's sort of up to you to delete it or not. But for every person who signs, we generate 2 letters. First-class letters we mail to the Army officials, the Secretary of the Army and the Joint Chief of Staff of the Army. And we've done that 60,000 times in the last 18 months. So the generals, they are literally getting a small bag of mail every single day from people around the world that support Bradley Manning. And we want the opportunity to send those letters for you too. We have a good team of volunteers who that's what they do, 8 hours of most days. Sign a petition, become a local organizer, find ways to share campaign materials, be part of this International Day of Action when the court-martial starts. Come with me to Fort Meade, to the gates, try to fight to be inside that court-martial, to stand with Brad. We are in an uphill fight. We are the underdog, but I know from my own personal experience, working with other resistors, there is hope. I expected to go to prison for years. I didn't. Aaron Matada expected to go to prison for years. He never spent a day in jail. Pablo Paredes, when he refused to get on that ship, expected to go to prison. That didn't happen, all because people cared. Bradley Manning, the stakes are higher. The military wants to make an example out of him. The world is more interconnected. Data is moved around much easier. They need to make that example out of him to any future whistleblowers. But on our side, for people who care about government transparency, holding our officials to account, being responsible with our tax dollars, then we need whistleblowers. We need the next Bradley Manning to step forward, and that will not happen unless we step forward for Bradley Manning today.
Let's talk about Bradley Manning, the Army private accused of supplying WikiLeaks with all of those revelations.
He is held in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day.
Clear violation of multiple codes of the Uniform Code of Military Conduct.
The overall conditions of confinement are horrific.